Hello YouTube and the vast world of the internet. My name is Maria Bryan and I am a bisexual woman living in the east coast of Canada. I am studying psychology, philosophy, and English at Allison University, and I have a passionate interest in fashion as well as a healthy thirst for information. This time 4 months ago I published a video for the purpose of exploring a creative project for a sociology class I was taking, which featured a couple individuals, including myself, and exploring all of our opinions regarding a large spectrum of social constructions regarding gender and sexuality. I would like to now present to you a sort of continuation of this project by presenting to you another video exploring the specifics regarding something that I've been interested in for quite a while now, and have explored and been given the opportunity to explore a little bit further at an academic level over the last couple months. This topic is that of gendered fashion. That is how society's ideas of gender influence how we present ourselves in the pieces of clothing that we wear. This topic is that of gendered fashion. That is how our society's ideas of gender influence how we present ourselves through our clothing choices. This is everywhere in our society and especially in our media, and there are particular types of clothing that are considered typically male and typically female. In a study by Brenda May Woodhill and Curtis A. Samuels, they make a point that gender stereotyped people may freeze up when faced with sex-reversed situations, such as a man in a skirt or a woman in suspenders. Why is this? Why do people react so instinctively to the way that people dress, and they make very automatic judgments about people's gender in regards to these things that they're wearing? It is also very important to ask if this is always the case, if this is as rigid as textbooks would like you to think. Does everybody react to fashion in this stereotyped way? And does everyone necessarily abide by these stereotypes in the way they dress? Well, let's see. First of all, if we want to explore the idea of gendered fashion, we must first understand what is meant by the word gender. It is not a person's sex, nor is it their sexuality. Rather, the accepted definition of gender refers to all expected and actual thoughts, feelings, and behaviors associated with masculinity and femininity, which is continuously constructed between internal and external structures, and is affirmed or modified through social interaction. But even this definition has some problems. This definition is made exclusively within the context of a two-headed idea of gender, that there is only the masculine and only the feminine as is identified from a socio-cultural standpoint. The term gender is of relatively recent origin, and since there is such a large amount of human attributes that are typically associated with each of these genders, there is no linguistic magic that can isolate the strictly social and cultural components of femininity and masculinity in a single operative term. Gender may right now be the best term available for focusing attention on the socially acquired meaning of being female or male, but we also must be aware that these definitions are flimsy and very black and white. Fashion can be seen as having a power over these representations of what is a man and what is a woman. Even when we try to talk about individual choices of what to wear, an entire discourse emerges which updates and maintains the distinction between the man and the woman through their wardrobe and their bodies. These distinctions are often created because of historical attitudes or learned behaviors and are reinforced by the media and society. When it comes down to the basics of a garment that a person might wear, the only influence that biology might be seen as having would be in the covering of genitals or other sensitive areas, which we can see historically in a lot of our fictional representations of Adam and Eve, and still modernly in the male and female undergarment choice. While biological distinctions between what males and females might wear might seem obvious, once we add this influence of society and the idea of gender, things become far more complicated. You can always easily tell a person's sex by looking at their genitals, but can you tell a person's sex by what they're wearing? Not always. And if you can, what is the fashion cues that tell us whether the individual in question is a male or a female? The historic influence that we see gender having lies a lot in the traditional belief system that divides the social world into two discrete gender spheres. Men working in the public, paid sphere, and are as being breadwinners. Women as working in the private, unpaid sphere as homemakers. This is the whole hunter-gatherer idea, and it gives us some basic distinctions in what is historically acceptable for male and female individuals to wear in respect to their social role. Men's clothing was often less restrictive, more durable, and more readily dirtied. Meanwhile, the female's clothing was more delicate, clean, and often involved wearing skirts. At times, many skirts. As history progressed, we kept seeing this as a prevalent standpoint in fashion. Modernly, we have a few types of typical male costumes and female costumes. For example, the male bourgeoisie costume that has always been around has always taken its elements from the uniform. Whether it's a jacket, a tie, a shirt, a hat, or a particular way of wearing trousers. Meanwhile, in Michael Kimmel's Guyland and a study by Rosemary et al., we see an image of the typical guy costume that is quite common nowadays, which includes baseball caps, t-shirts, cargo pants, jeans, and sneakers. The typical girl image that we might see in these involves tight jeans, short skirts, high heels, tank tops, and dresses. Our modern society even has typical ideas of what the lesbian female and the gay male might look like. These stereotyped ideas run as deep as the mere colors of our clothing. Males being associated with the color blue, females being associated with the color pink. And of course, members of the queer community being decked out in rainbows. While we do see these stereotypes alive and reinforced in our society, like our defined ideas of masculinity and femininity, these stereotypes are certainly not absolute. The diminishment of such strictly divided sexual roles is something that we have seen in the last century and can be observed through the dwindling in the use of skirts by women and the increased interest in marketing high fashion to men. This is a good thing, as abiding to some of these stereotypes that we see in fashion and gender can be harmful, as seen in the recent protest against slut-shaming. This issue is sparked by a Toronto law enforcer telling women to avoid dressing like sluts in order to avoid being victimized by sexual assault. This remark set off a firestorm of criticism and ignited a movement of women advocates standing up against the idea of what they might be wearing, inviting a man to sexually assault them and to treat them as a mere sexual object or to accuse them of being sluts based on simply what they're wearing. These sorts of mistreatments do exist in the real world, despite the fact that a lot of what is considered to be stereotypically female fits into the same category as what this law enforcer and other people might consider as slutty, such as high heels and short skirts. Demonstrators at protests in response to this issue carried some interesting signs saying things such as, "The skirt is no excuse for rape," and "I was wearing a sweater and pants." There are also cases of negative events occurring because of individuals engaging in the fashion stereotypes of the gender opposite of their own. For example, the color pink is often associated with femininity. So when a man wears the color pink, he might be sneered at and be referred to as being effeminate by those who uphold the common stereotype of pink being female. Despite all these restrictive stereotypes and their negative qualities, there is a bright side. Recently, we are seeing a lot of questions being asked about the rigidity of society's ideas of what exactly is the feminine and what exactly is the male, and what other gender options there might be out there, and why an individual should have to restrain themselves to just one of these categories. Because of this questioning, we have seen a lot of exploration within fashion as to how typically male or typically female garments can be defied or blended with one another. During the emergent gay liberation movement in the 1970s, we saw a openness about bisexuality and homosexuality, and it encouraged a lot of rock performers to publicly experiment with their gender blending style. From the pink boas of Elton John and the changing personas of David Bowie, to the sexual ambiguity of Boy George and of Marilyn Manson, This theatric androgyny has become an accepted convention in popular music, as well as in our society right now. While it can be just as hard to talk about the definition of androgyny as it is the definition of gender, a good way for us to look at this term is as referring to an individual who can engage freely in both feminine and masculine behaviors, and one who is equally capable of feminine and masculine tasks, and who does not prefer one over the other. In her study regarding the nature of androgyny, Woodhill even says that androgynous individuals might have an advantage as they are sensitive to both masculine and female cues in their social environment and can engage in whatever behavior seems fit at the time. I personally believe that our current society in general is more androgynous than we realize, and it is becoming harder to find particular articles of clothing that are restricted to being identified as strictly female or strictly male. We see guyfication in women, in particular college-age women, as it is likely to see them wearing jeans, t-shirts, sweaters, sandals, sneakers, articles of clothing that are generally considered guy wear. The occurrence of men wearing skirts is also becoming more acceptable, in particular in recent fashion choices by the rap artist Kanye West, helping the man skirt escape the confines of the high fashion runway. Speaking of the world of high fashion, one of the most impressive changes that I think we are seeing right now in regards to fashion and gender is the change in the standard for the models who are in fashion around the world right now. We are seeing a better balance between the numbers of male and female models in both ads and on the runways, as well as the emergence of many androgynous and sexually ambiguous models. This allows for a lot of encouragement to explore the creation of unique aesthetic combinations on both the male and the female body that otherwise might not have been conceived. Even in fashion drawings used by designers, we see a more gender-neutral form being used in order to create the images of the garments before they're made, and this makes them more easily worn by men and women. We are seeing less of the abstractly skinny or curvy female form, and less over the overtly muscular male form, and rather not only a more gender-neutral form, but a form that is more realistic to the bodies of the general public who are buying the product. One of the funnest examples that I have seen of this exploration of gender crossing and gender blending is a slightly satirical photo project by Hannah Pousset, where a series of male and female pairs were photographed in their own clothing. Then they switched outfits completely with their partner, resumed the same position, and took photos of that. Some of the results were quite silly, and often due to sizing problems, but nonetheless, some of these photos point out how easily interchangeable particular articles of clothing might be. You can see a link below. Well, after being bombarded by all this information, you're probably wondering, what is the point of all this? My point is that while the stereotypes of gendered fashion certainly do exist in our real society, and they are in reputable research, they're not exclusively what most people think of or abide by while they're getting dressed in the morning. Oftentimes these stereotypes are engaged in without a second thought because we have learned what is normal for a man to wear at a business meeting, or what is appropriate for a woman to wear to a cocktail party. While each individual is certainly entitled to wear what they want on their own bodies, equally as important to the freedom in fashion is the awareness of your own personal fashion choices. What are these choices influenced by? Comfort, color, context, the variety of genitalia you want to cover, the ad you saw the day before, the kind of person you want to be seen as. Each of these options and many others are valid reasons, but the important part is understanding why you made the choice you did. Our society is moving towards a greater freedom in regards to sexuality, gender, and of course, as I'm interested in, fashion. Not only does this need to be celebrated, but it also needs to be studied and understood in order for this freedom to further itself in a healthy way. In the Western world, we are lucky that a large portion of people have gotten away from the strict rules of thinking that we see in gender stereotyping. For example, that if we put a dress on a boy, he becomes a girl, or if we cut a girl's hair short, she becomes a boy. While our society is far from perfect, this is an important step. Patricia Califato said that fashion is a vision because it celebrates the aesthetic dimensions of both bodies and forms, and is certainly a deeper aesthetic that is not limited to mere appearances. This vision is one that is certainly worth studying. So the next time you look in the mirror or in your closet, I encourage you to think about the reasons for your clothing choices and what they say to you, what they say to the people around you, and why, hopefully, you love to put them on.